Hi, I'm Bill Simmons, Artistic Director of the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center in beautiful downtown Indianapolis. Welcome to another one-to-one with Bill Simmons. I'm delighted to be joined today by Corbin Fritz. He is one of the lovely staff members who's continuing to make the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center go during this extraordinary time. He's an artist, a theater artist specifically. He got his undergraduate degree from Butler University right here in town, that is helmed by my dear friend Diane Timmerman. So it's so wonderful to have Butler students in our family. So welcome, Corbin.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I start out every one of these with just a check-in as to where people are. We're now many months into this pandemic, and 2020 is not playing out like I think any of us thought. So what are you doing to for the Phoenix, and what are you doing to connect to your passion, which is the theater as an artist?
For just like staying in tune with kind of artistry, I've been really connecting with the national scene a little bit more. I've been participating in a lot of the NNPN conversations and meetings that I'm to do through the Phoenix and learn from them. And then I'm also connecting with playwrights all over the country, just talking to them and engaging with them as as people, as friends, as fellow artists outside of just a work colleague in one specific setting. So it's been a really great time to work on artistic things for personal growth. Like I've been playing more music, and I've been doing a lot of digital art and things, but also to heal. We as artists, our humanity is our commodity. And so this time allows all of us to kind of hold visual together a little bit for all that it takes to create art. And we get to heal a little bit during this time, which is cool. It also is making all of us crazy, but it's on the whole, I think it will all be probably better artists for it, longer, more enduring.
So what are you specifically doing to quote unquote heal? I shouldn't say quote unquote heal, because I think all of us, if we've taken this great pause in 2020 to sort of think about what we come back to when we're going at it, we're going to be, I'm sure we'll be guns ablazes again by this time next year. What are you doing now to, I don't know, to learn the lessons of the universe to move into 2021?
A lot more phone calls with family and friends,
It's lovely.
in that way, but then also just sitting outside and breathing fresh air, and not leaving my phone inside, and just being a human being, not engaged in the zeitgeist of the internet. The social media is a really interesting thing, and we're just kind of beginning to understand how it is, how it controls us and how we control it. And so I found this year especially that stepping back from that a little bit really kind of reminds you what it is to be a human being. A lot of people, cooking is their outlet. A lot of people love cooking because it's a very like primal human thing. But I like just being outside and being in nature. That's kind of my little deal. Yeah, well, and I know we've had this conversation, and I've had this conversation with Janet Allen too, is like, oh my God, evenings. Where were these? Where were these for years and years and years? I've never once seen the sun set, and I didn't think it was a real thing. I'd only read about it. Like, it's
a great
really,
gift. It's a
yeah.
great gift for us to be on pause for a while, because when we do get back to the work of the Phoenix, we just have to find a healthier balance, because us working like maniacs to make that thing work is just, it's not, ultimately, I don't think it serves the theater itself. I don't think it serves the entity of the Phoenix for us to be stressed out and tired all the time. It's really hard to grow and be artists when it's always about, you got to get this much more done, and then the next day it's this much more done, as opposed to let's just do fewer things and go deeper with them.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Well, and what
so
that takes is, oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead.
Yeah, what that takes is it's a cultural shift about how we value artistry and artists. There's often conversation about like what do we do about the union, because like for a whole number of things, but also like the idea that you can only like it's holding a certain standard of living, and to like why do we have to work 6 days a week? That's more than most people have to work, and so for that to be the standard is kind of a lot, and so it's going to take a lot of different entities like very far apart all coming together and kind of changing their perspective on artistry, on American artistry, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I'm concerned that regulations will be laxed so that more things can get produced or something like that. I think I'm a little concerned that we're going to be forced into overdrive when we first open back up, when we should actually ramp up over an extended period of time, because it's like running a marathon. This is in theory, once we start back up, we don't stop till we die, like that's always kind of been the plan before the pandemic. So short of another pandemic, we need to find a way to make it sustainable for everybody involved, and enjoyable. We've lost way too many people from this industry who just couldn't give up their whole lives. They thought that was a bridge too far, and I can't say that I blame them for that. It's hard when you have to do something or else you'll go insane. It's easy to be exploited by the greater system.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more breaking down of old systems that are going to happen over the next 6 months, and then, like you said, it's going to be building back to something different. What have your conversations been with our colleagues in NPN? Anybody specifically that you talk to, either occasionally or reliably, and sort of what is the lesson you're getting from that part of the universe?
Yeah. So the one person that I usually connect with the most is Danielle Ward over at San Diego Rep. And she is, I'm also the artistic director of Character House, legendarily very like artistic minded and not as much management minded. She is the company manager of San Diego Rep. And so when I met her, I was like, oh, I think I can learn a lot from just like talking to you and, seeing how your brain works. Just like I, continuously learn from Delia in that way. And so when we first started having our conversations in the summer about like our strategic, anti-racist plans for the American theater, complex, right? Like how do we make new work, the NNPN into an anti-racist organization? How do we make the theaters within it do that? The thing that stood out to me was how detailed her plan was. I was able to look at it, and it's just pages and pages and pages of very reasonable, actionable, sequenced steps to reduce racist structures within San Diego Rep and open it up to make it a more inclusive and equitable organization. And then to interact with, to like see that, and then to see how her interaction with her board went after that, and how that continued to grow. And this is the last thing I'll say on the NNPN was, we had a conversation about the actual like new plays, the literature of it. And I think that it is fully within the NNPN's wheelhouse and obligation in terms of what they do to begin to create and foster a network that allows for anti-racist storytelling and narratives. And so that doesn't like, or stories rather that are grown in anti-racist soil. An example that I give a lot is, for a lot of people, Gone with the Wind is not about slavery, but it was grown in racist soil. It was grown in a soil and a culture that cannot sustain us, in the conversations that we're having in the world that we live in now. So what does a family drama, just a regular family drama, not, necessarily racially charged, grown in anti-racist soil look like? And I think that that is really going to be where the great power of new play institutions and media companies all across the US, that's where the heart of this change has to be. Because we can put up, social justice plays all day long, and social justice plays accomplish one thing, and they're about social justice, and that is awesome, and I fully support it. However, it's the plays that are not about social justice, the soil in which they are grown is going to become really vital to understand what anti-racist stories that are not social justice stories look like on the American stage moving forward.
And what does that mean to you when you talk about the soil that you grow these in? What goes into that soil? I have an idea based on my conversations, but I'm curious as to where you are with that thinking. What does that all mean?
Yeah. So I think a really good example, and it's ironic because it's not from the US, but would be Sex Education. The show it's now on Netflix. It was on
Oh,
Hulu.
sure. Yeah. Got
But
Gillian Anderson?
I think so. It's a great show.
He's the therapist.
Yes. Yeah. That show, everybody has their own thing, right? Like everybody's a different orientation, a different shade, a different, somewhere on this great, XY axis plane that is, being a human. Everybody kind of has their own thing, and it's all about representation, but it's never called out. It's never even addressed. Like if you think that if you have a gay Black character in your show and you think that you have to have some kind of an altercation between that character and like the great whiteness structure that, is so ever present in our, especially Indiana society, all you're doing is training your viewers to do that. All you're doing is training your people, the audiences, that's a thing that happens. And so if you just don't even question it, if there's no fight for the right to exist in a space, people will stop challenging people's right to exist in spaces. If you just say, this is what this is who these people are, and these are the stories, and it's about the narrative and the story and not about breaking some mold, then I think that's more kind of where we're going, or where we need to go. If you also look at a show like Woke, for example, that is an absolutely social justice show, right? So it's a little less applicable in terms of the differences that I'm talking about. But that is a show that's absolutely grown in anti-racist soil. It centers Black characters. It centers nuanced gendered stories and sexual perspectives. But it's all about a cartoonist. It's about a guy who is trying to strive as a cartoonist, not necessarily strive to be allowed to live. And though that is a constant struggle for Black men in America, to only focus on that story creates a representation that in the long term will be limiting. And so, championing breaking the bonds of racism is vital for social justice work, but it's the real stories outside of those structures, the real, Black American experiences once they're outside of racist structures, those are going to be the stories that are vital to tell, because that allows us to see a future that is not here yet that we can model then.
So that's one of getting back to what you just said about sex ed. I think the same thing about a show like Schitt's Creek, and I heard Catherine O'Hara talking about, I think she won a Canadian, the equivalent of a Canadian Emmy Award 2 or 3 seasons ago, and she won a few of them in Canada before she finally got her Emmy from here in the United States. But she talked about what a delight it was to do a comedy that isn't about gay characters or people of color. It's about the ridiculousness of the human existence, right? And that we laugh at ourselves as humans, and that there isn't a episode about, you know, David experiencing a homophobic slur or something like that. That those, who those people are just who they are, and it's
Mhm.
the ridiculousness of the interactions between the personalities that we laugh at, and that it isn't making it about those episodes aren't about a specific social issue. And I feel like I'm old enough now, as I'm in my early 50s, to look back and see some of the shows I grew up with that were sort of pivotal in advancing the cultural narrative of this country. And I think of All in the Family in the early 70s, which is, you know, really a very political sitcom. And it was funny, but also tackled really big issues. And that, you know, Norman Lear, I just think was a genius of the 20th century. But then I look and I understand that Bill Cosby has a lot of problems now, but the Cosby Show itself, to see an affluent, upwardly mobile African American family, and it's not about that. That's just who they were. I think was really pivotal in the '80s for a lot of us who, you know, grew up in the '70s and '80s, and were like, oh, okay, and I grew up in a very, very white high school, but to see that every Thursday night on NBC was really, it really lasted with me. And I think there's some other shows since then, but I really think that Schitt's Creek may be one of those shows that we look back and we're like, well, that was where culturally we took a big leap forward in an Emmy-winning sitcom, not being about gayness, just being about a variety of human beings
Mhm.
just living, right? So
Yeah.
I that's one of the things that as we start thinking about work for the Phoenix when we get back to producing indoors, is how we create an environment in which we have a lot of voices at the table. And one of the people I've gotten close to in the National New Play Network is Olivia Lilly at Prop Theater in Chicago, and Michael Burke, who is not specifically with an NPN theater, but directed our production of The Agitators last spring. And he was just named Associate Artistic Director of About Face in Chicago. And I know he and Olivia Lilly are working on a project. We're talking about the three of us building a project together that would also involve staff training and artist training. Like, here's how you build a devised piece, where you try to create a rehearsal room and a workshop in which everybody has a voice at the table, and we really lean into inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And it really does have to do with who is at the table creating the work. Talk to me a little bit about Character House. This is your production company, a little bit about its production history and why you created it and where it's going.
Yeah. One of the, like, I originally started it because my uncle made a machine learning program, and it would give you product names. And so you could like program the industry and the product, and it would give you a bunch of different names
That's
that
awesome.
hadn't been like registered yet. And so I was like, do a theater company, and it spat out Character House. And I was like, oh my God, that's a great name. And then I looked up the domain, and characterhouse.com is like $4,000, but it's available. So I got characterhouse.art for $10. But so that's like
Character
how we
House
kind of
got what?
.art, A-R-T.
Oh, I didn't even know that there were those.
Yep, there
That's
there
awesome.
are as of just recently. um, so anyway, that's where we got the name. And I picked it up my senior year of college because I knew I needed a way to produce my own work. I've always known that that was going to be essential. Looking ahead of me, the person that I always looked up to was Michael Burke.
Mm.
He was the one who blazed every trail that I'm now following, except short of being the facilities coordinator at the Phoenix. But like the grants I've gotten, the jobs I've gotten at the IRT, the directors I've worked with at the IRT, and then obviously like working at the Phoenix with him. All of those things, I've just been tracking his career and trying to just follow the trails that he blazed. which is why I'll be going to DePaul. No, but so when I graduated, I was like, okay, I know I need this. And then I worked around for a little bit. We did like a super crazy out there clown show in the basement of somebody's house because that was, I also come from a huge devising background. That was like the vast majority of my training at the Moscow Art Theater was devising techniques and generative techniques, just like we did with Olivia in that the lunch club meeting.
Right.
And so we, you know, did a couple shows through that process and stuff. And my senior show was with the same, like who would eventually become company members of Character House. And so, you know, we devised that show, which was a devised interpretation of the Diary of Anne Frank. And then it expanded into current like human atrocities happening across the world. And all of that was a result of me living and studying. Well, in between living and studying in London, living and studying in Moscow, I lived in Berlin, but I did not study there. And I went to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. And while I was there, the news broke about the Myanmar genocide happening. And so for, you know, 2 months, I was locked up in a Berlin flat, just reading about the Myanmar genocide, visiting these, you know, Holocaust memorials and museums and things like that. I saw the Anne Frank house and spent a lot of time trying to figure out a way to use like Eurocentrism that we have here in the US. I mean, we all read the Diary of Anne Frank, and there's a reason we all read the Diary of Anne Frank. And it's because we can most closely relate to that because we're all white, or a lot of us are, you know, that are controlling the curriculum for public schools. And so I wanted to, you know, bring an Indianapolis audience in with that and then show them current situations in Syria and in South Sudan and in Myanmar that are still happening. And the name of the show is We Said Never Again. And it continues to happen. So anyway, so that was that process, which really informed the kind of generative process of devising and like how I actually stitch it all together. And all of that was when I was in college. I also studied anthropology, and I went on tour with Dead and Company, the Grateful Dead cover band, and like wrote about American jam band culture and the concept of moving seamlessly from one artistic piece to another, and you know the concepts in there, and how that can begin to create a mystical environment for viewers and audiences. And that's why you see those concepts, you know, in Black Church, same sort of thing. You know, play a hymn and then you kind of keep the jam going into another one. And it's really kind of flowing and things like that. So that was always kind of my goal with the kind of theater that I wrote and devised and created and directed was, how can we tap into the flow, like that mystical, you know, level? Because if you can do it in music, you have to be able to do it in theater, right? Like there has to be a way. This is kind of like a big hypothesis of mine, is that all art, you know, you can somehow find a nexus point of. Anyway, so after all that, I left. I worked around. I did Bright Star. I did sound for you guys, with Mike Lamoran designing and stuff. And then I bought. I was going to move to Denver, but I found a very cheap ticket to Berlin. So I flew out to Berlin again, and I was like, you know, I think I have all this like European devising training. I think I just want to go out to Europe and just do this because, you know. So I ended up going and seeing a show at the Schaubrunne directed by Milo Rau, and it was called Lenin, Lenin, as in Vladimir. And it was about the last days of Vladimir Lenin. And it was very Chekhovian. It was set in a state outside of Moscow in a way. Well, I mean, the whole thing, but, you know, that's very Chekhovian. And it was a live cinema piece. And so it was a movie and a play happening at the same time. There are camera operators on stage and a big screen above the stage. So you can kind of go back and forth between the two.
And the cinema experience, had that been pre-recorded, or the actors continued off in a place that the audience didn't see and that was live?
So actually the whole set was on a turntable and it constantly spun. It never stopped spinning. And so sometimes the kitchen would be facing you, but you'd be watching a scene up on the screen that was happening, that was just at that point upstage, and then it would slowly turn. Very cool way of doing it. Very, very cool way of doing it. And that just rocked my socks right on off. And when I was watching that, I was like, this is the future of drama. I'm very influenced by Martin Esslin, and he really emphasizes a unity of drama, the field of drama being one, not movies and television and theater. It's all drama, right? But not all drama is theater. And so
it's why some really great stage plays do not translate to film very well. I don't think August Osage County made the leap. I don't think a play like Virginia Woolf, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, I don't think it makes. I've never seen a great glass menagerie committed to film, because I think those medium, that the medium of theater demands the interaction of a live audience in order for the play to live in the zone it's supposed to live in. Like, I think August Osage County is a very, very funny play, but without the support group of an audience to be like, it's okay to laugh at alcoholism because I'm an alcoholic, or or where I come from, or we all come from families that have some sort of dysfunction, right? And so I think of Act 2 of August Osage County, a lot of us have had some pretty uncomfortable family Thanksgivings and Christmases, maybe not that awful, but where alcohol or pills or a combination thereof have made it a difficult night. And so I think when you don't have that sense of camaraderie with an audience and you're sitting alone in your home, or even in a movie theater, you're still, that's a recorded thing, and what the actors do is already done. You're just responding to what came out of the editing room. And I think that's one of the great lessons I've taken from this pandemic is we can show all the recordings we want of live theater, and I'm going to watch Brian Dennehy's Death of a Salesman here this week, and it still is a live performance in a can. But I think I agree with you. I think the future of the theater is going to be, the Phoenix and even LORT theaters like the IRT, we're not going to be able to afford to do, Lion King in our smaller spaces, but we can create an event that's both a live theatrical event and has elements of recorded pieces, and to create a unique experience. That I think is something that's really, we were already starting to toy with it a little bit, and I'm going to really get into it as we start producing in 21, 22 and 22, 23, is how we start creating, like what you did with Nina Simone, the High Priestess of Soul, which was that your video work was an integral part of that experience. It wasn't just Nina's voice and music and Justin Sears Watson's dance company. What you did with the videography of that was instrumental in the emotional impact of the finished piece. And it's why I think it resonated with audiences and why they extended for a whole nother weekend. And I think that's where we're heading, is this hybrid thing. And that part of it is the part that we got to figure out, but we've got time to do that.
Yeah. So I would, having done the video for the dance company and then having experimented so much in live cinema, because I guess to pick up where we were, saw that, came back to the US, and then wrote a show called Dr. Chekhov, and then we did Antigone, and then we did a sketch comedy show, and then we did Uncle Vanya through a grant through the Indiana Arts Commission, and that was in January. The reason that works so well, the video works so well on stage with the dancers, is because they were dancing. But if you look at integration of video elements and especially live camera stuff in works like Ivo Van Hove's Network, or especially his West Side Story, oftentimes you hear critiques of, I don't know what to look at, it's too distracting. And so the reason that the video works so well with the dance company is because they're dancers. It's because it's you don't have to look at their faces to understand what is happening. It's a full, stage experience. So your video design can be a little more scenic in that way, because it's not pulling away from, assuming that it's not too much and it's, good, but it's not pulling away from what you're watching on stage. With live drama, I have found that you have to use the camera and the video to reinforce what is happening on stage. You can't show something that, like, in the opening number when the Jets are dancing around, you can't show stock footage of the Jets like walking around doing tough guy stuff into the camera, because that is not what is happening on stage. It's distracting. You like, and I love giving the audience the option of, you can either look at the stage or the screen. And I was just having a conversation with James Still about this, actually. But you must make a choice. And once you really get down to brass tacks about it, the choice kind of becomes pretty simple and apparent. If you can tell a story without cameras there, get the cameras out of there.
Sure.
They don't need to be there. So the priority when you're doing this kind of live drama with camera work and things like that, it's got to be the screen, because you as the director have to know where the priority storytelling entrance of the dramatic world is. In theater, it is the entrance of the stage. In live cinema, it has to be the camera, because if we could tell the story without the camera, we would just be doing live theater. And live theater is great. It's awesome. It's been around for a long time. The model works. But if you can do something more, that's when you get the cameras involved. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be spending the next couple of years trying to do that as well. Trying to create that kind of art here.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Corbin, thank you so much. This has been an enlightening conversation. I'm always excited to be talking to theater artists about what they're doing during the pandemic and where they are with their art and what's coming next. And you gave me a good sense of all three of those things.
Absolutely. I appreciate you listening. I've thought a lot about it. And so it's, I appreciate people hearing me out on it. And I appreciate the shirts. I've been wearing the hell out of them.
Yes. Well, that's been another boon to me during the pandemic, is I've been letting go of clothes and books and, and plants. I've been regifting plants as plants have come into my yard. I've given out. Yeah. No, I'm glad you're enjoying them, and there's more to come. I actually pulled a like, nope. That one can go on.
I've got all your shirts and all of Constance Macy's old scripts.
That's a good combination. That's a good.
It is.
I might have some scripts for you too. I should go through I got a huge wall of. I have to keep some texts that I need for teaching Meisner. But a lot of that other stuff is like, I'm never reading the Greek tragedies again. At least not right now. And I'll always can get a copy of that. But I've been getting rid of a lot of scripts that I used to think, oh, I'll come back to this, and I'm like, you're not coming back to that script. Just let it go. So. Well, be well, Corbin, and keep up the good work.